It has been a while since Mark van Aalst and I launched the SXA tutorial series approximately 3 years back. We got great feedback on this series in social media or meeting you at events in person. However, you also gave us the feedback that the creation of one component has never been shown. The text teaser. While working on the new XM Cloud tutorial series, I was also checking the old episodes, and look what I found in the archive. The lost tape. Let's see if it's actually on there.
So welcome to our next episode of our SXA tutorials. Today we're going to discuss components and more specific, we're going to talk about renderings. We're going to use the homepage of our client, the company website, and we're going to discuss which components we're going to make, which renderings we are essentially going to make, and how we can create a bit more customized versions of the default components.
So to start with, SXA introduces the so-called Toolbox. So this is a container in your Experience Editor where you find all your components that are available to the authors. And they are structured in some kind of sections so that you can organize them in a good way and authors can find them very easy. Yeah, each page is constructed using components called renderings. And those renderings can be added to the page simply by dragging and dropping it to the page in the Experience Editor. SXA already provides a big set of predefined renderings, simple things like image rendering or video rendering or rich text rendering and many more. But no worries, it's very easy to create your own renderings and components with custom logic, or it's simply configured or renamed, whatever is needed in your project. And this is also what we are going through in this episode. So if you remember, we wanted to start with the homepage of our company solution. Just to recap, it consists of the carousel on the very top with a call to action button, some kind of text teaser underneath, and then the services teaser, portfolio teaser, and then the client teaser at the very end. And today, or in this episode, we are going to create the most simple one that we have here on the list, which is the text teaser. And we are going to use the out-of-the-box wizard to create components. To recap it a bit, so if you think of how to create and adjust renderings in Sitecore, usually you have, or in most of the cases, you have either a view rendering or a controller rendering. No matter what you have, you will have some kind of view file, so in CSHTML file. And SXA basically builds few options on top of that. So one of the options is to simply override the view file, and SXA provides a very easy and clean way to keep the original file but have a path to override the view file of existing components. The other way that you have is rendering variants. So the view is basically just, let's say, a very generic view, and the actual markup of your component is defined in the so-called variant definitions using certain renderer items. So you have certain renderers that define, for example, a wrapping div as a section renderer, or render your fields from your data template. There's also another option using Scriben, so you can script the whole stuff. But in our example, we will just start using the items.
Yeah, maybe just to add, the overriding a view might sound a bit scary, but the way that SXA handles this, as Sebastian mentions, it has a certain structure to it, which will still make sure that you're safe for any upgrades or whatsoever. So you will not lose any customized views for that matter when you're going to upgrade SXA.
Yeah, exactly. So taking a look at rendering variants from the author's perspective, once the author has dragged and dropped the component to the page, in this floating toolbar, which also names the component, you will find a drop-down called variant. And there you can choose from a list of variants to basically adopt the UI of your component using the exact same data template. You also have the chance to enhance that. So if you provide thumbnails for your variant definitions, they will appear here in the drop-down, which makes it much easier for an author to find the right variant of the component instead of reading through the whole list that we've seen before. Usually, maybe to give some kind of rule of thumb, we recommend to not have more than 10 variants. In most of the cases, if you exceed that kind of limit of, it's not a limitation, but if you exceed that, you might want to think of maybe creating a different rendering for its job. Yeah, but it's a very easy and fast way to customize components in the way of just doing simple adjustments like the background color in this example. But you also can have examples like this where you have the page list component with a certain carousel behavior, or you have a behavior where you also see details of the apples and bananas and avocado, or you just have large thumbnails with the title of the fruits. You can have lightweight adjustments of the rendering, but you can also have bigger adjustments, even showing different data. You can even show data from different data sources using variants. So there's not much of a limit, I would say.
No, and just to add to Sebastian's story, this component you're seeing right here, the page list, it still uses the same sort of data source. It's just different visualizations of that data source. So only the visualization has changed, nothing else for that matter.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So if you want to define a rendering variant, you have for each rendering, so in this case, we have a promo rendering, and for each rendering, we have a rendering definition. So we have, in this case, we have a default definition, we have an extensible promo definition, and so on. And each definition consists of certain items that define the markup. For example, the first one we see here under extensible promo is the promo icon, which is a field renderer and references a field from your data template. And the one underneath, the promo text, is a section renderer, which renders a certain div that wraps around something else. So in this, or that renders a certain tag, which could be a div, could be also something else. And this could wrap around different other renderers. And this way you can set up your markup. But we will show that in a live demo soon. And of course, you can provide your CSS classes to it. And this way you have an easy way to style your markup using items. So let's create our first component, which is the text teaser. And we have the field label, which is the one about us here on the very top. And then we have a certain headline. We have a sub-headline here. And then we have some kind of rich text with some lists and whatever a rich text can do. So let's get into the demo. So in our solution, we have created in an earlier episode already our tenant and our site. And now we want to create a new component. So what we usually want to do first in SXA is creating a module. So just roughly explained is a module helps you scaffolding all the items that you require in a site. So if you define everything in the module, then you can install that module later to your site so that everything is created for you, especially in multi-site environments. That might make sense that you don't want to set up everything yourself and might forget even something to be set up. So this is all handled by the installation process of your module. Also, when you create a tenant or a site, you already get a list of modules that SXA provides out of the box with all the functionalities that you can install to your tenant and to your site. And this is also what we're going to use now. So the modules you will find under system, and don't be trapped. It's not under modules, it's under settings. And then under feature. And the first thing we will do is we will create some kind of solution folder for us. So we call it SXA tutorial. And then underneath we will create our module. So you cannot just insert your module from here. You always have to do it from the feature node of your within the settings. So here you find the insert option for module, and in that wizard that we go through now, you can choose where you want to install your module. So it will be the text teaser, and we will have our new folder for our solution, SXA tutorial. The next thing we can choose is where we want to have folders pre-created for us so that everything is well structured. So definitely for rendering, we want to have it in templates. We will also need it for branches. You will see later why. I don't think we need settings, but let's keep that for the moment. Renderings, definitely. Placeholder settings, who knows, layouts, and media library. And last but not least, you can choose if you want to create the module on tenant setup or on site setup. So for components, I think it usually makes sense to just install it on site setup. So I will leave or I will uncheck the tenant setup.
Yeah, and if you want to make changes later on, if you need additional, you still would leave out like media library for now. You could still recreate that folder later on yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is just a pre-creation. You can clean things up. You can add things. So it's not that you have no way back.
No,
So that was sorry.
It's not set in stone. Yeah. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
So the module has been created. So it's a text teaser site setup module, and it's created in a folder underneath our solution folder that we created in a text teaser folder. So everything is nicely separated. And now we create our rendering. So therefore we go into layouts, renderings, and then on the feature folder. And here we do, well, can we actually run it from here? Yes. Yeah. So here we use the insert options to create a component. So this also leads us to a certain kind of wizard, which we create our text teaser. So we provide a name of the component. The module is already set because we used the insert options from the folder that we want to create it in. If we do it from any other location, we can still set the module here, so it will be properly created in the according folders. So I'm not sure about our front-end work, but let's already provide a CSS class that is added to the div that is wrapped around the whole component from the view. So just call it text teaser. This way we can easily identify also later with CSS and style it properly. And if we would have created already a view, or we want to reuse a view that is created or was created before, we can provide the path here. In our case, we just want a view to be created for us automatically, so we just leave that blank. Now it's about the data source behavior, and you can choose from 3 different data source behavior. The one that we are going to choose is that we are going to ask the user for a data source. This is pretty much the normal Sitecore behavior of creating components. So you get this window where you can choose or create a new data source for your component and then use that and fill in the data. You can also use the current page as a data source. So there's no dedicated data source for that component. And the last option is that the data source is created automatically for you. So the author is not asked to create one, and it's created under the data folder of the page. So this way, it's not going to be reusable, but it's the most lightweight and easy user experience for an author to just drag and drop a component and then modify the content in what you see is what you get way without being disturbed for creating a data source. We will choose this one because we might expect that this is going to be reused. Rendering templates, we can just use the default one, which I think contains already the most important settings like grid settings and all that stuff provided by SXA. But if we have a custom one, we could also choose that here. There could be base rendering parameter templates to be chosen, which we will also leave for now, and the base data source template. So we just inherit from standard template in this case, and we will get a more or less blank template in terms of content. We could also use certain other compatible templates that our rendering is compatible with, but in our case, we have none, so we just leave it blank. Last tab is that we can select the page as a data source or use the feature of creating background images, select the data source behavior use component variants or having dynamic placeholders. In our case, we will use component variants, so I'm going to check this one, and I think that should be good to go. Let's see. Yeah, it's done.
Oh, that was quick.
Yeah, hopefully not too quick, but let's see. So if we take a look at our rendering, you can see that there is a controller assigned to our rendering, which is one of the standard controllers from SXA. We have the parameter template assigned, and we have a data source location assigned, which we probably want to change. So let's do that already. The data source location or our data source template will be actually what is pasted here in the data source location. And what we want to have is under our site data folder, we want to have a folder hosting all our data sources. And therefore, we will create a template for that folder that we are going to insert in our data folder. And to make sure that all our sites that we are going to create are working with the with this data source behavior, we are going to use a query, or in our case, even two queries. One query is for our local site context, and the other query that we use is for the shared site context, which we haven't talked much about, but SXA offers the possibility to have shared sites to share, on the one hand, content, but also presentation items. So not to lose that functionality, we will use two queries, one with the local site context, and then also addressing data sources from the shared site context. So the path will be then our site, data, and then any item of the template text teaser folder. And the same is for the shared site.
Whenever you're going to build your own templates or whatsoever, you want to use those query tokens like $site and $shared sites, because that will make your functionality compatible with the multi-site implementation that SXA offers you.
Mm-hmm. So I think our rendering is now set. We can also take a look at the view. So this is the view that has been created for us in a certain folder. Here, by the way, you find the CSS class that we provided in the wizard, in the component wizard, and we can change it anytime, as we've mentioned. So this is the location for it. So next, we are going to check our templates. So let me quickly copy the name that we've used here, not to make any spelling mistakes later. So it's text teaser folder. And we are going to go to the templates. So in feature, SXA tutorials, text teaser, we got created with the creation of the rendering. We got created two folders. One is called data sources, one is called rendering parameters. And we find our data source template in the data source folder, obviously, and the rendering parameters template in the text in the rendering parameters folder. So one thing that we are missing is our text teaser folder, and therefore we are going to insert a new template. Oh, we can insert directly template folder. Perfect. No, well, this is not going to work, right?
No.
So, so the name should be text teaser folder, and we are going to use well, all the other folders are created from just from the system templates called template. So let's just go there. System templates, and then this one here.
Yep.
And click next. In that folder, that's correct. Next. And we are done. What we want to do is change the icon to make it an actual folder. And now we can, as we are already in templates, we can already adjust our data template for the text teaser. So we had the label, so this will be our content area. And then we had the label field, which will be a single line text. That's fine. We had a headline field, which can be also a single line text. We had a subheadline field, which maybe should be a multi-line text field. And then we have our content field, content, which should be a rich text, so that we can also have like the list.
Yeah, some HTML stuff in there.
Exactly. So that should be fine. We could also set the icon, but I think the icon is pretty fine for a text teaser, so it looks textish. So
yeah.
So what do we do next? Now we need to take care about the markup of our rendering, and therefore we have to adjust the rendering variance. So usually the rendering variance you find in your site under presentation and then rendering variance, and here are all your rendering variants. But as we were working with modules, we will define that in our module or in a branch template that is installed by our module. And so this can be installed to any site that we are creating. So going back to our module, which is under System, Settings, and then Features, SXA Tutorial. We see that by creation of our rendering or our component, a few items have already been added to our module. So we have an action to create an available renderings item, and we have an action to create the rendering variants. So if we take a look, these actions are usually structured like that you have a location where you want to install a certain item. So in our case, we will install it to the rendering variants. So on the left side, you see a generic site. And under presentation, you have the rendering variants. So this has been chosen automatically for us. And in the next field, you see the template that is installed to that location. So in this case, it's the default text teaser variant, which is probably found under our branch templates. And we can provide a name for the template that is created. So in this case, it's text teaser, which is totally fine. So as we are here already, we can make sure that our data folder is also created, and then we actually go to the creation of the rendering variants. So let's insert another action to add a site item, and we will call that add data folder. Okay, so we want to add something to our data folder of our site, and the template that we want to use is the recently created text teaser folder, and we call it text teasers. So now let's go to the rendering variants. So the template that is going to be installed, we find under templates, branches, feature, SXA tutorial. Again, all the structure has been built for us by creating the module and also by creating the rendering through the rendering wizard. So everything is well structured, always the same, very consistent, very nice. And we talk about the default variant. So let's define our markup. First, we have to create a variant definition, and let's call the first one just default. And now it's up to the markup. So if you remember, we had some kind of, so first we show the label in the middle of the whole width. So I would suggest to start with a section renderer, and we can call it maybe div, or we can call it label div or something like that. And now we can choose a tag that is used for it. So there's a long list of tags, but we only need the div tag, and we are using Bootstrap, so we can use the Bootstrap grid classes to define the look and feel of that div. So as it's full width, we use column 12. So inside, we will now place the label, and we are using the field renderer. And if we name it directly like the field, it's using the $name token to map the field name of our template. We can also have it different, so you can name this item as you want. Important is that in the field name field, you have the exact name of the field that you are going to reference from the template. So let's leave it like that and take, for example, a span to design it later. Save it. So now we have those two columns, ones with the headline and the subheadline, and one column with the actual content. So we're using, again, a section renderer to define the first column. So let's say column or headline column.
Yeah, and the naming of these items is more for your own reference, right? You can well, as you said, name them as you would like. It's not going to appear in the HTML structure. It's just, well, if it makes sense to you, then it's all right, or to your author.
Yeah, exactly. So this is our headline column. Of course, we should sort it after our label div, and into that, well, it will be a div, and we will provide already some classes. So for mobile, it's full width, but for our desktop, it will be something like half width, and that's already it, I think. Oh, we could directly duplicate this one because we need two columns with more or less the same behavior. So let's say this is our content column. Okay, make this last as well. Sort last. And now we are going to add the fields. So insert fields. So the first one is the headline, which we will use as an H1. And the second one is the field subheadline, which we'll use as an H2. Save. And now, last but not least, we need the field content, which we will put just in a P tag. Oh, not pre, but P. And save. So that should be our rough markup for the rendering already. So I think our rendering and our modules are good to go. So let's test it.
So how would you add it now to your site then?
Yes. So on the site note itself, well, on nearly all items, but especially on the site note, we find the in the context menu we find the entry scripts, and in the scripts you find add site module as a script, which is out of the box in SXA. So this way we can install any uninstalled module to our site at the point in time we need that. So imagine that you roll out certain features to certain sites, and maybe even some sites don't need that feature. So this way you can control where you want to install certain features to certain sites. And let's see. So there's only our recently created module that has not been yet installed to the site. If there would be others, they would appear here, and we can just check the ones that we want to install. So let's simply do that.
Yeah, while installing, it might be worth mentioning that you also have the option to create your own system modules, where a system module will not appear in this dialog window of adding a module, but they will just be created upon site creation.
Yeah. So let's see if everything has been installed for us. So we find the text teasers folder, and probably one thing we've missed is providing insert options. So this we will do. Then there should be under available renderings. There is yeah. Do we want to save something? Yes, let's save it. We will find an option with our text teaser rendering. So this is our component, or this is how we handle our toolbox. So what is in the toolbox and what can be dragged and dropped to the page. So this has been installed as well. And let's also check our rendering variants. So we have our rendering variants text teaser here. And we have our default variant with the markup we created earlier. So this way you can install it anytime to any site that you need to add this feature. So let's fix first the insert option. So in templates, we go to feature, SXA tutorial text teaser, and go. So for creating standard values or insert options, we use the standard values. So let's create them. Here we go, and let's configure the insert options. So under our text teaser folder, we want to create text teasers. Source text teaser. Okay. Save. So just to double check, we can create now text teasers under our text teaser folder. So one thing I want to check before we actually test our component, under available renderings, you have two options on how to structure your toolbox. So the one way to structure it, which is the default one, is that it's structured by the folders of your within your renderings. So, but if you want to decouple it and have this structure here under available renderings, fully control how your toolbox looks like, you need to check this checkbox which says group renderings and sections according to available renderings items in the site. So this way you make this list here or this setup fully control how your toolbox looks like, regardless of how it's structured in the renderings folders. Let's save this one as well and create a test page, which we call just text teaser test.
So by selecting that checkbox, it will mean that per site you can have a different toolbox then, right?
Exactly. And you can enable components or disable components depending on what you want to have. So let's open up Experience Editor.
Oh, that's cool. So you can even remove the components you're not using. For example, Evangelist or whatsoever, you're not using that, just remove from your toolbox to declutter it, essentially.
Yes, definitely. I mean, you should remove everything from the toolbox in your site that is not styled or that authors shouldn't use. This way, you also improve the user experience because providing like hundreds of components makes them search very long instead of having just the 10 that they need for the daily job. So let's actually test our component and drag and drop the text teaser. We're going to create a data source, call it text teaser test. And here it is. So this is not yet centered, but this is our label and it has to be styled properly. Here's our headline. Here's our subheadline. And here is our content as a rich text. So content ABC. Save our changes and our first component is good to go.